That was Michael Anthony, okay? 100% dedicated, never did anything to hurt those guys, and they tried to hurt him again and again and again. For Eddie to say he had to show him what to play and had to teach him all those songs, that is the biggest line of bullshit I've ever heard in my life. I was in that band for 11 years. There was never a video camera involved of Eddie showing him what to play.
After years of silence, Michael Anthony, the former bass player for the legendary rock band Van Halen, has finally broken his silence at 70 years old. He has revealed the shocking truth about his departure from the band and his chaotic relationship with Eddie Van Halen. This might come as a shock, but you need to hear what Michael finally said about Eddie after all these years of keeping quiet. Michael Anthony developed his love for music when he was very young. His dad played the trumpet, which made Michael want to learn music too. When he was little, Michael also learned to play the trumpet because his father inspired him. Music was always important in his family, and this helped Michael develop his love for playing instruments. Michael was born in Chicago, but his family moved around a few times before they finally settled in a place called Arcadia, California in 1966. This move was very important for Michael's future because Arcadia was right next to Pasadena, where two brothers named Alex and Eddie Van Halen lived. These were the same brothers who would later become his bandmates in Van Halen. When Michael was in school, he liked both music and sports. From 1967 to 1969, he went to Dana Junior High School in Arcadia. At school, he joined the marching band, which helped him get even better at music. Playing in the band made him more confident about his musical abilities. Besides music, Michael also played sports like track and field and baseball, where he was a catcher. He was good at sports and could have become a professional athlete, but as he got older, he realized he loved music more than sports. By the time Michael reached high school, he had decided to focus completely on music instead of sports. He spent lots of time practicing and getting better at playing instruments. This hard work and dedication prepared him for a future career in music. In 1972, Michael graduated from Arcadia High School. Soon after finishing school, he would meet Alex and Eddie Van Halen and eventually become part of their famous band. When Michael first started playing music, he wanted to play guitar like many teenagers do. But most of his friends already played guitar or drums, so he decided to try something different. The bass guitar. One of his friends, Mike Hershey, gave him a Fender Mustang electric guitar. Instead of using it like a regular guitar, Michael took off the two highest strings and used it as a bass guitar. Later, his father bought him a proper bass guitar and an amplifier, which gave him better equipment to practice with. Michael looked up to several famous bass players. His favorites were Jack Bruce from a band called Cream, John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin, and Harvey Brooks from Electric Flag. He studied how these musicians played and used their styles to help develop his own way of playing bass. Even though Michael was naturally left-handed, he learned to play bass right-handed, which was different from most musicians. Before joining Van Halen, Michael played in several different bands. He started with a band called Poverty's Children, then played in bands like Black Opal, Balls, and Snake. Snake was the most important band for him before Van Halen came along. It was a three-person group where Michael played bass and also sang lead vocals. The band mostly played cover songs by popular rock groups, but they also wrote and played some of their own music. Snake and Van Halen's early band, called Mammoth, often played at the same local shows and concerts. One night, Snake was opening for Mammoth at a concert at Pasadena High School. During the show, Mammoth had a big problem. Their sound system stopped working. Without thinking twice, Michael stepped in and let them use Snake's sound system so they could continue their performance. He didn't know it at the time, but this small act of kindness would eventually lead him to join Van Halen. His talent and generosity caught the attention of the Van Halen brothers. While Michael was studying music at Pasadena City College, he met Eddie Van Halen, who was also a student there. At that time, the Van Halen brothers' band Mammoth was having problems. Their bass player, Mark Stone, had left the group, and they needed someone new to replace him. Eddie and Alex Van Halen invited Michael to come play music with them to see if he would be a good fit for their band. Even though Michael had heard them play before, he was amazed by how talented they were when they all played together. Their energy and skill impressed him so much that he immediately knew they were something special. After they finished playing together, the Van Halen brothers didn't wait around. They asked Michael to officially join their band right away. Some stories say that Michael first talked to his bandmate from Snake, a guitar player named Tony Cajano, to get advice about joining Van Halen. Tony reportedly told him that joining Eddie Van Halen, who was becoming known as an amazing guitar player, would be a great career move. However, Michael later said on his website that he didn't hesitate at all. He accepted their offer immediately. At the time, Michael had been planning to continue his studies at a college in Santa Barbara after finishing at Pasadena City College. But once he became part of Van Halen, everything changed. He was so excited about being in the band that he decided to drop out of school just before he would have earned his degree. Instead of finishing college, he put all his energy into making music with Van Halen. This decision would soon pay off in ways he never could have imagined. In 1974, Eddie Van Halen, Alex Van Halen, David Lee Roth, and Michael Anthony officially became known as Van Halen. They had originally called themselves Mammoth, but they discovered that another local band was already using that name, so they had to change it. The SHOCKS band worked very hard to make a name for themselves, playing in clubs throughout Los Angeles and West Hollywood. Their talent caught the attention of Gene Simmons from the famous band Kiss, who helped them record a 29-song demo. Their big break came in 1977, when they signed a record deal with Warner Brothers. The following year, on February 10, 1978, they released their first album called Van Halen, which introduced them to music fans around the world. At the beginning, Michael was considered a full member of the band. He shared 20% of the band's debts and earnings, including money made from selling merchandise like T-shirts and posters. The band's manager, Noel Monk, was also included in this financial arrangement. However, things started to change for Michael in 1984 when tensions within the band got worse. During the 1984 album tour, David Lee Roth and the Van Halen brothers put pressure on Michael to sign away all his future songwriting credits and royalties. This meant he would no longer make money from songs he helped create. The agreement was made retroactively, which means Michael also lost financial rights to the band's 1984 album that had already been released. According to Noel Monk, the band's manager, the situation was completely unfair to Michael. He later wrote that if he had been in Michael's position, he would have refused to sign the papers and even skipped the performance that night to make a statement. Instead, Michael didn't argue or fight back. He just signed the papers, losing millions of dollars in the process, while the other three band members stood over him and watched. Despite these challenges and unfair treatment, Michael stayed with Van Halen for many more years. The band released 11 studio albums between 1978 and 1998, along with a live album in 1993 and two greatest hits collections during the time Michael was in the band. Apart from his work with Van Halen, Michael also helped other musicians. In 1988, he helped produce a demo recording for his brother Bobby Lee's band called Asylum Suite. This band had been active since 1984 and had a lead singer named Michael Thomas Fear. Michael's help allowed them to improve their sound and move forward in their musical journey. As early as 1996, there were rumors that Michael Anthony had been fired from Van Halen. However, despite these claims, Michael continued to work with the band. The rumors never completely went away and followed him for years until he finally left the band for good after the 2004 reunion tour with Sammy Hagar. Michael's role in the band had already started to become smaller by the time Van Halen recorded their 1998 album called Van Halen 3. Unlike previous albums where he played bass on all the songs, his involvement in this album was much less. He only played bass on 3 songs, while Eddie Van Halen took over the bass parts for 6 other songs. Even though his contributions were limited, Michael was still credited as a songwriter for the album, along with the rest of the band. After the album was released, Michael joined the band for their 1998 tour and was still mentioned in band announcements. He was also part of 3 reunion attempts with original singer David Lee Roth in 1996, 2000, and 2001. The last of these reunions even led to early versions of songs that would later appear on a different album. After leaving Van Halen, Michael started playing with Sammy Hagar more often during Hagar's solo tours. He performed as part of 2 of Hagar's bands called the Waboritas and Los Tres Gusanos. In 2002, Hagar and David Lee Roth went on tour together in what was called the Sans Howland, or Sam and Dave tour. During this tour, Michael made surprise guest appearances at some concerts. That same year, Michael teamed up with Hagar, Neil Schon, Dean Castanovo, and Joe Satriani to form a new band called Planet Us. This supergroup allowed him to perform even more frequently with Hagar. Planet Us recorded 2 songs. One of them, Psycho Vertigo, was originally meant to be included on the Spider-Man movie soundtrack, but in the end, the song was not used. The second song, Peephole, along with Psycho Vertigo, was eventually released on Hagar's 2008 solo album. At the end of 2003, Eddie and Alex Van Halen decided to bring Sammy Hagar back into the band for a 2004 tour. However, their original plan did not include Michael Anthony. They wanted to move forward without him. When Hagar found out about this, he refused to participate unless Michael was also brought back. Because of this, the Van Halen brothers had no choice but to let Michael return. However, there was a catch. Michael had to accept a new contract with reduced royalties. This contract only lasted for the duration of the tour, meaning Michael was no longer a permanent member of the band. In 2004, Van Halen released a compilation album called The Best of Both Worlds. The album included some of their greatest hits, as well as 3 brand new songs. However, Michael was not involved in writing or recording these new songs. He didn't play bass on them, and his name was not credited for any of the new material. The only thing he contributed was backup vocals on all 3 tracks. In recent interviews, Michael has revealed that he has not spoken to Eddie or Alex Van Halen since the 2004 tour. The only time he had any contact with them was when he briefly saw Alex at the funeral of Van Halen's drum technician, Greg Emerson. Michael has also shared his thoughts on why his relationship with the Van Halen brothers fell apart. He believes that their dislike of Sammy Hagar's business ventures, such as his Cabo Wabo tequila brand, may have played a role. Since Michael also started his own business selling his hot sauce brand, he thinks that this might have upset the Van Halen brothers, leading to the final split between him. In the summer of 2006, Michael went on tour with Sammy Hagar as part of a band called The Other Half. This group featured Michael and Hagar performing classic Van Halen songs, covering music from both the David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar eras of the band. However, in September 2006, Eddie Van Halen made a big announcement. He had decided to replace Michael with his own son, Wolfgang Van Halen, as Van Halen's new bass player. Then in February 2007, Van Halen announced they would be going on a new tour with their original lead singer, David Lee Roth. The tour started on September 27, 2007. Michael later revealed that he only found out about being replaced through the internet. He expressed his frustration, saying he was not happy that they were calling it a Van Halen reunion. He felt that a real reunion would include all the original members, not just some of them. At the official tour press conference, David Lee Roth agreed, stating that this tour was not a reunion, but a revision. Despite being left out of the tour, Michael continued performing with Hagar. On February 25, 2007, the 2 musicians appeared together on live national television during a pre-race show for a NASCAR event. During the broadcast, Michael suddenly jumped on stage and performed Hagar's hit song I Can't Drive 55 alongside him. A few weeks later, on March 12, 2007, Van Halen was officially inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. However, the event was not attended by most of the band members. Eddie Van Halen was in rehab at the time, while Alex Van Halen and David Lee Roth chose not to appear. Only Michael Anthony and Sammy Hagar showed up to accept the honor, making them the only former or current members of Van Halen present at the ceremony. After leaving Van Halen, Michael continued his music career by forming a new band with his longtime friend, Sammy Hagar. This band, called Chicken Foot, also included legendary guitarist Joe Satriani and Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer Chad Smith. Michael played bass guitar and sang backing vocals for the group. Chicken Foot released their first studio album on June 5, 2009 in Europe, and a few days later on June 9, 2009, in North America. The album was well received, and fans were excited to hear Michael and Hagar making music together again. The band continued working on new material, and on September 27, 2011, they released their second album titled Chicken Foot 33. A few years later, in 2010, Michael became part of another supergroup called Sammy Hagar and the Circle. This band featured Sammy Hagar as the lead singer, Vic Johnson as the guitarist, and Jason Bonham on drums. With this band, Michael continued to perform classic rock songs, including hits from Van Halen, Led Zeppelin, and Hagar's solo career. Now, after years of keeping quiet, Michael Anthony has finally opened up about what really happened between him and Eddie Van Halen. According to Michael, one of the biggest problems was the way Eddie treated him. Michael says that Eddie often criticized his skills as a musician and singer. Eddie would tell him that he wasn't good enough and needed to be shown exactly what to play. Michael remembered that Eddie used to say that he had to tell him every note to play. These constant negative comments hurt Michael's confidence over time. Michael admitted that it made it look like Eddie never believed in him. He explained that it wasn't just about playing music. Eddie's criticism started to feel personal. Michael felt like no matter how hard he tried, he was never seen as good enough in Eddie's eyes. This difficult relationship played a big part in why he eventually left the band. Even though many people thought he left Van Halen to join Chicken Foot, Michael made it clear that this was not the case. According to Michael, the situation in the band had simply become too difficult. The tensions with Eddie and other internal problems made it clear that things were no longer working out. He wasn't given a choice to leave on his own terms. Instead, it felt like he was being pushed out. After the fallout, he started working on side projects with Sammy Hagar, which eventually led to the formation of Chicken Foot. However, Michael insists that starting Chicken Foot was never about leaving Van Halen. He and Sammy were simply looking for a way to enjoy making music again. He wanted to move forward not because he was abandoning Van Halen, but because he still had a passion for playing. Michael remained dedicated to his music, proving that he didn't need Van Halen to continue his career. Despite the difficult experiences with Eddie, he chose to focus on what mattered most: his love for playing bass and making music. Looking back on his time with Van Halen, Michael chooses to focus on the positive aspects. He expressed gratitude for the years he spent with the band and the music they created together. Michael's departure from Van Halen may not have been on his own terms, but he has continued to pursue his passion for music. Michael Anthony experienced a very strained relationship with Eddie Van Halen throughout their time together. This tension eventually led to Michael's departure from the group. The problems between Michael and Eddie became most obvious during Van Halen's 2004 tour. Reports suggest that Eddie's struggles with substance abuse and disagreements over Sammy Hagar's promotion of his Cabo Wabo tequila brand contributed to a tense atmosphere within the band. It was during this period that Michael was reportedly forced to give up his licensing rights to the band's name and accept a pay cut, showing how much his relationship with the Van Halen brothers had declined. In 2006, the situation got even worse when Eddie replaced Michael with his son, Wolfgang Van Halen. This move was unexpected for Michael, and felt like a betrayal, especially since he had been a long-standing member of the band for so many years. Eddie justified the replacement by suggesting that Michael had effectively left the band to work on outside projects with Sammy Hagar. Despite all the professional problems and personal conflicts, Michael expressed regret that he and Eddie never got the chance to make things right before Eddie's death in 2020. In an interview, Michael mentioned that they actually hadn't spoken, and unfortunately they didn't get a chance to resolve their issues before Eddie passed away. This bothered Michael because they had some problems that were never fixed. This shows that the relationship between Michael Anthony and Eddie Van Halen was marked by professional disagreements and personal misunderstandings. These issues led to Michael's departure from the band and remained unresolved until Eddie's passing. After Eddie's death, Michael found some comfort when he reconnected with Wolfgang Van Halen. He attended a performance of Wolfgang's band Mammoth WVH in 2023. This meeting gave Michael a sense of closure, allowing him to honor the musical legacy he shared with Eddie while healing some of the hurt feelings with the Van Halen family. This is the shocking truth that Michael Anthony finally revealed after years of silence. The story of how Eddie Van Halen's constant criticism, unfair treatment, and personal conflicts led to the end of one of rock music's most important partnerships.